Welcome to the epicenter of sports and entertainment. This is The Rude Dog Show. Now, here's your host, Rudy Reyes.
How's everybody doing? Welcome to The Rude Dog Show. This is Rudy Reyes. Good afternoon, or wherever you happen to be watching. Thank you so much for tuning in. And, of course, the opener may or may not be there. I guess it depends on where you're at. And if you're able to capture the audio there. Anyway, wanted to jump right into this because this is relatively critical. The World Baseball Classic is on. Of course, everybody knows Japan just tied it up 1-1 with a solo shot to right field. And it was a low and deep ball, obviously, from the pitcher of the mound. It was just thrown poorly. I think there was a better pitch selection than that. But we're going to start off here letting you know that now Japan has tied up the U.S. 1-1 World Baseball Classic. But thank you so much. I am your humble host, Rudy Reyes. Thanks for tuning in. It's been about 20 minutes or so with me today. The show would not be possible without today's California, today's Canada A, and we are live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, anywhere and just about, well, everywhere, and whatever device you have in your hand, in your pocket, you have to be listening to today. And I must show some love to trophycase.app. Look, it's much more than an app. In fact, it's a one-stop shop for any and everyone who's looking for their next superstar. I say that because, and I mentioned this before a few times on the show, is that if you build it, the right people will come. It doesn't matter who it is. If they're looking for talent, they're going to find the next superstar, and that could be you. If you build it, they will come. Make it yours. Always be a part of the evolution of scouting. You want to be a part of the story, stay par for the course, and download it today. Go to trophycase.app. Now, I wasn't in action yesterday. Of course, stomach bug certainly hits people, and it hit me relatively rough, along with the sciatic. But we are here live today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. It was announced today that in the NFL, due to the Miami Dolphins and the, lack thereof professionalism, will forfeit a 2023 first-round pick, 2024 third-round pick, following investigation as to whether or not the team violated policies pertaining to the integrity of the game. And look, I think this should be taken relatively seriously because poor behavior can cause this type of issue to rear its ugly head. And it can allude to punishment like this and maybe even worse, depending on where you're at, who you are. And clearly, there could be a lot worse things going on than that. However, the teams that will, and I said will, have picks in the first round due to trading a wide receiver and a first-round pick belongs to the Carolina Panthers, who are now on the clock. So in Carolina, they've had to deal with the likes of Baker Mayfield, which didn't go over very well. Sam Darnold didn't go over very well. And a few other quarterbacks that didn't quite make the cut. When I say make the cut, I don't mean that they're not good enough in the NFL. They just could have been good for their system. So they decided to make some changes. And when I say changes, I mean changes in coaching, personnel, and, of course, the most rigorous spot that needs to be looked at, of course, the most viable, most expensive spot is a guy under center, and that means the quarterback. And I've gone back and forth with this quite a few times, and to my imagination, I would say that there would be two guys who would be, I'd say, more than capable of being able to serve that guy under center, albeit Bryce Young, albeit C.J. Stroud. And I've bounced this off the wall, bounced this on a few people. And the most thing that I can probably come up with is I'm going to have to take Bryce Young. And I don't say that to disservice C.J. Stroud. I just think Bryce Young, regardless of his size, regardless of what his stature is, it doesn't matter how big of hands you have, and all this other minutia, I really just don't believe that you can have a guy in Bryce Young and not draft him with that first overall pick. They did give up quite a few But at the same token, you got to get the quarterback of the future, especially a franchise quarterback. And I believe that's going to be Bryce Young, who I believe in my heart of hearts, and I've seen him play at Alabama, Roll Tide. I just believe Bryce Young is a guy who has shown so much as a Heisman Trophy winner, and then in his following year, just did so much more, learning the game, understanding the game, recognizing that the NFL speed is going to be a lot different than this, and really mostly pro ready. And again, not a disservice to CJ Stroud. I think CJ Stroud is a fantastic quarterback out of Ohio State. He showed that during the postseason, and a guy who can be relied on so well. The problem is that he's a sophomore, and I'm not going to say anything that to the effect of whether or not CJ Stroud can be the guy under center for the next team that's on the clock. But I think that when you look at his total body of work at Ohio State, I really believe that he's going to be that guy. He's going to be picked, and he's going to be picked high, probably the first, because we've seen 5 to 6 defensive linemen or defensive-minded players drafted by teams in last year's draft in Las Vegas. I think that's going to flip the script a little bit when I say that the Houston Texans, who are number 2, are going to take CJ Stroud as their franchise quarterback, the one under center, the one that's going to do so much for this franchise. I think he would be the next runner-up as far as being pro-ready is concerned. I think they have a franchise left tackle is going to do an absolutely fantastic job protecting him on the left side. They need to do that to the same right side there in Carolina. Just by the way, signed up an extension on his contract, so he's going to be there for next at least 2 or 3 years. And I think CJ Stroud is a plug-and-play guy. I know that they had Davis Mill, who shown nothing but fantastic play. I don't even think the Texans believe he's going to be the quarterback of the future there in Houston. But I think CJ Stroud is a guy who's very pro-ready for that organization. And you can question the organization if you want to, but from a player standpoint, he is plug and play and not a plug and pray. Whereas there are other quarterbacks who also belong in this conversation of being someone readily available to be drafted in the top 5. And then we're going to kind of move over here, and I'm not going to say that this particular player is not looked at right now. He's being scouted pretty hard. You have other players heading into the draft. The Eagles hosted a 2023 NFL draftee to understand the system. I guess it's kind of the new thing in the NFL, at least with teams that find a way to get these guys in their system to help sell them on why they should be an Eagle, a Texan, a Cardinal, a Steeler, and whatnot. I look at Arizona, and I think to myself, well, they're going to need an edge rusher now that J.J. Watt decided to retire. I know he was more of an interior guy, but when you look at the exterior, at least on the edge and the outside looking in, I think a guy who's physically ready to go, has power moves, is going to learn a lot more in the NFL. It's going to be Will Anderson Jr. And one of those things that I really like about him is his quickness, his fastness off the ball, his physicality, being able to be a disruptor the minute that ball is snapped, someone that you really need to have as part of that linebacker rotation or edge rushing rotation. You need a guy on the opposite side as well. I don't know what side they're going to choose him to play on, maybe his natural position, but I really think they need someone to really step up. And of course, Alabama and Nick Saban certainly don't mince words when you're talking about a guy who just makes a difference and continually makes a difference. He did it at Alabama. I think he's going to Arizona. I think he's going to make a big difference there right off the bat. And a guy, again, it's a plug and play, no plug and pray. When you look at this organization in the AFC South, you can think to yourself, well, do they need a quarterback or do they need offensive linemen? Well, there could be some questions there as well. We know that this past season, we've seen Jeff Saturday come in and clearly was able to get the job done to some extent, but not to the the disgruntled behavior of Jim Irsay, who ultimately said, well, it was great. Thank you for your service. We appreciate it. You always have a home here in Indianapolis. And that would be the Colts, who will grab a very sought-after guy in Anthony Richardson being a quarterback. I don't know that he's plug and play. I don't know that he isn't. I do know that watching him at Florida, he's got a very, very good IQ, a high IQ guy that can run out of the pocket, a guy who can make things happen on the run when pressure gets to him, when it breaks down. I think he is that kind of guy. Whether or not he'll make the kind of impact with the Indianapolis Colts, that's hard to say. But look at it like this. They've had multiple quarterbacks who's done absolutely, nothing for this franchise. And, of course, Andrew Luck was the last quarterback who seemingly retired out of absolutely thin air. And I think they need a franchise guy. I don't know that Anthony Richardson is it, but I know that he is, he's great out of the pocket. He's great on the run. He can make things happen impromptu. And I believe the offensive system needs to change instead of not just a pass first, but instead of just the same old there in Indianapolis, you need to give him solid protection, which would enable him to get outside of the pocket, to be on the run, maybe in a short yardage situation, or to sneak it in the end zone. I think Anthony Richardson certainly a guy to look out for. And I think he's going to fend that offense relatively well. It's just depending on whether or not Indianapolis Colts use him in the way that he's designed to be used. Don't forget, collegiate quarterbacks, and we've seen this happen time and time again, who are familiar in a system end up getting pulled away from that system to be put in somewhere else and not have a familiar game plan associated with what they've learned in college. We've seen that with Watson, who's now in Cleveland. And I think if Anthony Richardson and the offensive coordinator can get on the same page, quarterback coach, head coach, I think Anthony Richardson could be around for quite some time there in Indianapolis. My fifth pick, I'm on the fence about this particular guy, only because it's not questioning the team necessarily, it's questioning him. And I say that because he's a junior coming out of Georgia. I know they're the two-time NCAA national champions, but at the same token, you got to look at his off-field activities, which really begs the question as to whether or not he is pro ready or if he has issues in the NFL. I think some teams and some coaches and organizations are prepared to handle a guy like this, and perhaps they are not. It just really depends on how they plan on utilizing him. And when I speak of him, I mean Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter, known to be dynamic, but he is the most talented. So do you take talent over concerns of off-field issues? You really have to weigh those out if you're in any given NFL organization. And that starts with ownership as well as Pete Carroll. So look out for that one. And then I look at the Detroit Lions. Heavy defense. They did let some guys go in the offseason. They reworked contracts with some guys. The Lions probably more active than I've seen in recent memory as far as in free agency. But one of the things I do like about where the Lions are going is that the head coach is very defensive friendly, a former defensive guy himself. And this Lions team was knocking on the door of playoff contention at some point during the season, but then just fell off. And unfortunately, they had to start all over again. But it's a good way to start when you have Devon Witherspoon in the quarterback position out of the Fighting Illini, and that's Illinois. He's not very tall. Then again, no cornerback is, if you look at the NFL historically. None of these guys are really tall. He's 5 foot, 11 and a half pounds, maybe $182, somewhere in that genre. He's similar to a guy like Denzel Ward. If you want to compare notes, Witherspoon played in the Big Ten, probably one of the hardest divisions to play in. And not only does Detroit flip the script on the other side of the ball, they've added some offensive playmakers. But in the secondary, they re-signed Anzalone up front. That's going to help them in the backfield, especially with the amount of pressures. I believe they need to do some more and better, more thorough and more called often defensive blitzes in order to really make his presence known. But one thing about Witherspoon's size does not tell the whole story. It's about his athleticism. It's about him knowing where the ball is and knowing when to run that thing back. So, again, another guy who's going to be looked at, sought after, and I think that certainly is going to turn a lot of people's heads if for some reason he does not get picked up. This is Rudy Reyes on The Rude Dog Show. It's going to be on TheRudeDogShow.com. You know what, Zach? That's actually a really good question. And to be honest with you, if if I was a betting man, I'm not a betting guy by any means, and I never will be. But one thing I do know is that guys that have credit issues outside of any given organization, I think he's going to fall. And when he falls, it's probably going to be somewhere around the 16th to 20th pick in the first round. I hate to say that, but with a guy who has off-field issues, certainly begs the question as to whether or not he can rise above that and alter and change his direction. Hopefully coaching will do that. Hopefully Pete Carroll can do that. The organization needs to be on standby just in case this guy fails and draft someone who does not have field issues. But I think he's going to drop pretty low in the first round. But Zach, thanks. Great question. I appreciate it. Any other questions, comments? Feel free to chime in. I'll get to those questions. As many as I have, I will promise to get to. Again, thanks, Zach, for that input. So with that, I think that the NFL overall, when it comes to players acting poorly, players that make considerable changes in the offseason to become a better player, better person, a better individual, certainly is something that the NFL as well as teams locally really need to look at. I had Daniel Martin on last week, and we were talking about how poor behavior could affect an individual, and we used a class case of Ja Morant. So that is one guy certainly needs to take the bull by the horns and make those changes. Going with my 7th pick, I'm only going to have time to get to 10, but I'm going to go to 7. This particular gentleman from, I'm not going to say an outreach school, but someone that is, he's actually, he's in a good spot. And I say this because, unfortunately, when they acquired Chandler Jones, they thought he was going to be the next coming. Unfortunately, he kind of failed those expectations. But when you have a guy in Max Crosby on the defensive side, who's a complete game wrecker in every aspect you can think of, he's going to need a guy like Texas Tech's own Tyree Wilson, whom, for all intents and purposes, the Raiders could take a quarterback. You want to have a backup guy, and they could still take a quarterback, but they have Jimmy Garoppolo, which is kind of a hit and miss as to whether or not he's going to be able to get to the next level and not cost any team that he plays for, as we've seen in San Francisco, now with the Las Vegas Raiders, games. Because turnovers will create points, and points will lead to losing. And that is what it is. And with that, the Atlanta Falcons, I think they've been missing in the secondary for quite some time now. And to be honest with you, they've been under the radar as far as draft picks are concerned. They've been relatively quiet. Free agency's provided some good talent for them, but overall, when I look at the Falcons, I think to myself, man, they need a secondary. They need an up-and-comer. They need a guy who's on point, who can do something, and Oregon develops speed. And speed kills. Speed hurts. And if you're the guy on the wrong side of the ball, that speed could kill you, and Christian Gonzalez could help make that a reality. Cornerback out of Oregon. He needs to team up with A.J. Terrell. I think they make a great combo. I believe they're also going to be probably somewhere in the upper ranks defensively as a collective defensive unit, more so than maybe other teams within the NFC and the division that they happen to play in the South. And then there's a lot of things that Justin Fields needs, and he has playmakers now on the opposite side of the ball. Chase Claypool acquired from the Steelers with a significant trade up in this year's draft. But he needs protection, and you need to get him protection. I think Peter Skoronski out of Northwestern, a guy who made an impact at the Reese's Senior Bowl, as well as just being an ultimate upgrade component to this line, who needs someone big and athletic, and Peter Skoronski definitely fits that. Bears pick him up at 9. And then I'm going to get to 10, and you know what? There's one thing that I know about this state, and when I say the state, you may know, you may not know. It depends on who you are or where you're from in this part of the country. But that's Lucas Van Ness. It almost rolls off your tongue like butter, but he's an edge guy playing out of Iowa. Philadelphia has just been getting plucked, one feather after another. But they say a bird of a feather picks another Lucas Van Ness altogether. And, they need stability on that edge. And I think Van Ness is a guy who could certainly provide that. He's great on the inside, great on the outside. And the fact that you have Fletcher Cox and multi-year All-Pro, Brandon Graham, another fantastic star for the Eagles, both re-signed. They're playing on one-year deals, though, and that could be where Van Ness fits the best without having to rebuild and start all over again. You add no more pieces in the 2024 NFL draft to complement Van Ness, and make sure you do your scouting, because if you do your scouting, you're going to get those right players. Of course, speaking of scouting, go to trophycase.app. It's the next evolution of scouting. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. You're going to see a lot of great things from trophycase.app. Go download it. It is free. Check it out, trophycase.app. I downloaded mine. I like it. I uploaded a lot of photos and a lot of goodness. So go check it out. This is Rudy Reyes on TheRudeDogShow.com. And with that, I will leave you guys adieu. Go enjoy the World Baseball Classic and have a great night. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. We're going to have JP Hoonstra. We're going to talk about what happened at the World Baseball Classic and maybe another special guest drop in. You're going to have to tune in to find out who they are. Thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great night.